Another edition of Bunker Office Hours, a weekly live show brought to you by the team at Bunker Labs, national network of veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs dedicated to helping our community grow. I'm your host, the one and only Iron Mike Steadman, coming to you from the brick city of Newark, New Jersey, joined by my co-host, Amy Warrington, and our guest today, none other than Edgar Rodriguez, all the way from Las Vegas, Nevada. What's going on, y'all?
Morning.
How's it going?
Amy's like, there's Mike again, shouting out the brick city. I know I love Newark, man. I love my city. Brown Mill is actually one of the local brands here, a lifestyle brand. They're just across the street from me. And I asked Edgar before we went live, I was like, man, where you from? And he said, LA. But it's funny how like now we rep the cities that we live in, right? They're home for us, whether it's Vegas or Newark. So it's cool, man. Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of networking and how to become a community builder. So real excited to do a deep dive on that with my man Edgar. But before we do that, I got two things I have for you. Number one, I want you to drop in the chat where you're dialing in from. And number two, Amy's going to talk about events that are taking place in the bunker.
Yep. Thanks, Mike. So not a lot going on. We wrapped up VIR applications yesterday. So anyone who applied to that, you should be hearing soon where you stand and schedule for group interviews for those of you who are moving on to the next level. And then also we have breaking barriers in entrepreneurship applications are still open. Those are open through the 17th. So you can get those applications in at bunkerlabs.org/breaking-barriers. And that is kind of it for right now.
Cool. Shout out to my man Jake. Jake's in the chat. Shout out to Miranda from Houston, Texas. Shout out to Warwick and to Keisha Roundtree down from Miami Beach. Oh, yo, what's up, y'all? Good to see y'all on the chat today. Real energized. Edgar, man, networking. And I told you before we went live how when I first entered this ecosystem, I think it was 2017, right? Mm-hmm. And then in that year, right, I do my little entrepreneurial education, do my Stanford and my Bunker Labs, yada, yada, yada. I start sending out emails to my network that were super selfish. You know, as soon as I learned value prop, problem, solution, go to market, I sent these emails to everyone that I was meeting that was basically just all about me, you know, and there was no context really given, right? Like, yeah, I would introduce the email, but I was just blasting them. I wasn't actually trying to build a relationship with people. And I messed that up early on, and I'm very conscious of it now. And so I think what we're talking about today is going to be super important because everybody knows that they need to network, but I don't even really like the word networking because I think people get it wrong. So I'm excited for you to provide some insight. So shout out to CJ from Chicago, audio engineer at Ironbound. So Edgar, yeah, let's talk about it. Let everybody know who you are, what you do, and why we're here today.
So my name's Edgar Rodriguez. I'm over in Las Vegas, been a resident now for 17 years, long enough to call it home. And I created the company Master the Network was to expedite that learning curve in networking, right? And networking is a convoluted term now because of how people go to network and they are prospecting. I took a step back from kind of, overview of okay, when I'm building relationships, who do I want to build relationships with? And I was just like you. When I first started networking, I did the very same thing. And I made those mistakes. So I went back, I acquired the knowledge that I was looking for, read a ton of books, and then actually implemented little by little and tested, okay, if they wrote a book about this, will it work? And then I would go back, reread the book and say, okay, did I do it right? Did I misunderstand something? And then that's what got the ball rolling is I was always looking for someone to teach me how to become better at it. And realize that if I'm there for Edgar, it was a struggle. But as I was bringing in key people into the network, then I knew exactly what they did. I got to know them on a personal level, right? Like I told everybody, look, if I get to know you on a personal, professional level, I know exactly how to position you with the people that I'm being introduced to. And showing up for them made that massive shift in my mind of now I know how to unlock, certain networks and being very strategic about who do I want to meet, right? And go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say, as I think back, right, it's super intimidating for a lot of veterans, though, because, yeah, we have this brotherhood, You and I are Marines. We can chop it up all day. But then all of a sudden, people transition out of the military and they're away from their tribe. And it's like, how am I supposed to show up? You know, like people tell you need to network, but like we have no idea like how to do it. And I think that's what's great about what we're building here with Bunker Labs is building this military connected network for our community around entrepreneurship.
Yeah, every time I meet a new veteran, and that's the first thing I ask them is, "Hey, have you heard about Bunker Labs?" You know, and the other organizations that we have here in town. I'll immediately connect them into the Southern Nevada Veterans Chamber, and get them plugged into our local ecosystem and say, "How can we help you? What are you looking to do? How are you looking to grow? What are you looking? What's your next move?" And then just having that candid conversation with them and just taking them out to coffee. Um, you know, and really, really diving in. If I really, really get to know you, I know exactly the right introduction for you. But you have to take the time to get to know people, and that was the key for me. Right? Is I said when I was in wealth management, I wanted to get to know people for who they are, not what they did. So every time I would go out to a meeting with them or go sit with them, my due diligence as a Marine was to recon their background, right?
Yeah.
So when we went to go grab coffee, it wasn't about a business meeting. It was more like, hey, what do you like to do? How do you spend your free time? And it threw people off because they're like, wait a minute, this is different. So that was my USP. I discovered my USP was getting to know people for who they are, my ability to connect with them, because we all have certain commonalities, certain things that make us tick. And if you understand what makes people tick, then you know the right doors to open. Right? Like you talked about earlier, Mike, you understood what you needed to do and you started sending off all these random emails. The people receiving the emails were probably thinking, but if you would have unlocked the door of like, hey, what is it you're looking for? What are you into these days? You know, and what are some of the challenges you're currently facing, right? The number one question in networking is, hey, what do you do? Right. And that's a question I think a lot of us get tired of answering. So I flipped it to like, hey, Mike, what are you most excited about in 2023?
That's a great point.
Right? Or taking even a step further is like, hey, how was 2022 and what are you looking to change in 2023?
Yeah. I'm taking notes, y'all. Y'all better be taking some notes down.
Right. So those little openers open a different type of conversation because now they're going to tell you what they're most excited about.
Yeah.
And if you really listen, right, there's hearing and listening.
Yeah.
If you hear what they're trying to tell you, that allows you to really, really dive deeper and say, okay, because of my network, right? Our network is massive because we have Bunker. However, my circle is extremely small. But that circle has another circle that has another circle. So in Vegas, like Dave, I've told Dave Berlin, like we're 2 degrees from separation here. If I don't know the right person, I'll reach out to you, and you probably do, right? Or our other ambassador with Monica, same thing with Spouse Lee, right? If I don't know the right person, I can reach out to her. And that's the beauty about building that key network is the key people in your network and in your circle, you keep them close. Everybody else, as you're building that network, you really got to think about the people you bring in are an extension of you.
Yeah.
So as you bring these people in, you have to have that conversation of when I introduce you to somebody, there's 2 responses you're going to get. Number 1 is, "Hey, thank you for introducing me to this person. I didn't know what they did was possible." The other is gonna be, "Hey, why the heck did you introduce me to this person?" But that's when you also have to have that conversation and willing to be upfront with that person of, "Hey, what was that conversation like?" The follow-up is the key as you're building out your network is I will always follow up. If I introduce you, Mike, to somebody that is in my network, I'm gonna follow up with you, number 1, to see how that conversation went, and also the person that I introduced you to, because I need to hear what type of conversation you guys are having as I'm building out the network, right? And I'm talking about if I'm building.
Yeah.
Once you have it, they know the expectation, they know the standard. They know the standard of how they should represent you,
One
which
of the
unlocks some doors. Go ahead.
one of the things I would love to do is make it plain for a lot of our viewers today, because as you know, somebody's like, all right, I want to start a business. Cool. They make their little Instagram page, maybe they get a website or something, and now they're like, I need revenue, right?
Right.
So what's the first thing they need to do? Well, I need to get out there and network. How do you
Mhm.
tie networking to revenue generation?
So great question. So if people know, like, and trust you, they'll do business with you. However, how do you translate what you do so they understand what you do? Because the way you communicate it might not be the way they interpreted it, right? So as you're building out your network, I would say your immediate friends and family are going to be your low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So if you need revenue, they need to know what you do. They need to understand your purpose. Why did you start what you did, right? Whatever company it is, whether it's product based, service based, they need to understand how you can help other people and what your company is going to do for other people. So I would say that's going to be your immediate, like, low hanging fruit that's going to be able to help you generate that revenue.
Um, in 2018, I want to say
Mhm,
2018, it was really 2020. I started looking at a lot of the donations coming into Ironbound Boxing,
mhm,
right? I started looking at a lot of my clients at Ironbound Media. Okay. Even hosting the transition podcast, our listener base and our viewer base for office hours. And I realized, man, like the veteran entrepreneur ecosystem is my tribe, is my
mhm.
people. Right. And I went to my first conference, which was the MilVet Startup Conference in 2022. Was it 2022? I think that was the first year they had it. So I went to that. And then I went to the Military Influencer Conference. That's where I met you in person.
Mhm.
All love, man. You walk in there, you're dapping people up, you're connecting with each other. And you know what you do when you do that? You turn everyone there into a warm intro for you, you
Yep.
know? And so now what I do is I'm very intentional about the networking things that I do. I don't even like to call that. I just like getting out from behind the camera, going
Right.
engaging with people in person. It's one thing to record podcasts and content, but like there's nothing that beats meeting people in person that you had on the show and everything. And I find immense value out of that. And so one of the things I try to guide people on of like, where's your tribe's watering holes? Like, where's your perfect customer's watering hole? Because I think that's where people get frustrated with networking is they're like, I'm doing all this networking, but I'm not closing any deals and yada, yada, yada. And it comes back to number one, who's your perfect customer? Do they even congregate there? And then do you have the right message for the right audience?
Yep. Yep. I know, like, with what echoing what you're saying, right, is something Dave taught me is there's a difference between networking and prospecting. Most of us go to networking events and we're trying to prospect, which is the wrong place to do so. You might have the ability to close somebody from a networking event that you meet, but if you think about your contact list, right, Mike, if I went straight to you after we met, straight for business, I just lost all your contacts. I might have closed you, but you easily have 200 people in your phone,
Yeah.
easily. But if I took the time to build a relationship with you, I unlocked 200 different opportunities.
One of the things you mentioned too was importance of following up. I sucked at that the first few
Mm,
years. That's why I'm a big proponent of people getting virtual assistants, even if it's just for 10 hours a week or something, because the
right.
amount of relationships sitting in your inbox, right, that could turn to revenue. Oh my gosh. I would have people in there that wanted to follow up with us, ask us about what we do with the kids in the community. But because I was so busy, I never had that follow up. Now I have a really good system when I go to these events and I get business cards and everything, I come back to my computer, I go through them all, right? I add them to my little list. I send emails out saying, hey, it was great meeting you, start building those relationships. Even here in Newark locally, I set 2 days away to go networking, right?
Mhm.
So, like if someone's in town and they want to grab dinner or whatever, I might do that on either a Monday night or a Thursday night. The same thing, too, for people here locally. I meet them at coffee on Thursdays. So Thursday mornings, I keep open to do coffee. And so my VAs, they know when to book me and where. And I already
Right.
got the spot set. So I say all that to say of like I was super scrappy early on. And now I've actually started to build out a system that allows me to constantly introduce myself to new people and build those relationships because people assume because I was an officer, because I went to the Naval Academy, that I just got this massive network. And they're like, oh man, you're so lucky you had this network. I built my network brick by brick, literally.
Mhm.
There's tons of people that have access to amazing networks, but I think the thing that we do, and I think you're referencing this like master the network, is you got to connect dots where they didn't previously exist. And then you get this kind of thread that's going that is obvious to people only after the fact. But before there, it wasn't there. It wasn't there. There were no guarantees.
Right. So you talked about two key things, right? One thing you said is you created a system and a process. The other thing I heard was you now have what's called a default calendar. And I think that's one of the most instrumental pieces that people can implement. If they know their schedule, right? If you know exactly what you got going on, whoever's working for you on the back end knows exactly how to pencil them in to your calendar. And that allows you to get more time back. Because when I first started networking, I was everywhere because people needed to see me for, okay, I'm trying to build a massive network. My mindset shift was when I pivoted to say, okay, when I go to an event, who am I looking for? In the number one response when I'd ask somebody like, hey, who's the perfect introduction for you? They're like, everybody.
Yeah.
Well, when you say everybody, I think of there's 50 people in this room. But when you learn to niche down and you know specifically, and the one piece of advice I've given everybody that I came across, even from Mick, have you ever introduced yourself to the person hosting the event? Number two, who sponsored that event? The reason why the host, because that host knows exactly who it's their event. They
I'm a,
know who your intro is. You go back to the sponsor's got money. They want exposure. So that is a perfect strategic partner for you to unlock other networks. And if you come with how can I help you first, that's a tidal wave waiting to happen.
So I want to turn to the chat. If you got questions on networking, please go ahead and feel free to drop them in. Edgar, I'm gonna say this: I had $1 million insight at the VFL Veteran Future Lab Summit. Okay, they had all the sponsors up there, and then one of the sponsors they recognized because it allowed them to purchase the adult beverages for the event. And I said right then and there, I'm sponsoring next year. You know, $500, $1,000. You know, we always assume these big sponsorships, like you got to do the whole conference. People need food, they need drinks, they need all these things. That's an easy way to add value, you know. And so I'm already thinking, because going from the guy going to these events, whatever, setting it this year, I actually want to get out there and I want to start sponsoring some events. Are there any questions for Edgar in the chat? People are quiet. You know, we got a lot of lurkers, right? They watch
Everybody writing down right now. Hold on.
You know, the lurkers, right? They watch your content, they check out your content, they know what you got going on, they watch the videos, but they'll never comment or they'll never ask questions. They don't like to engage. It's all right. I think LinkedIn did a statistic. It's like 90% of people out there are lurkers. 1% actually contribute, and like 9% actually engage with the content.
And that's a really good point, right? Like when you do networking and the importance of follow up, you also have to understand where is your loudest voice, because there's so many platforms you can utilize, but depending on your type of business, you also have to understand where your customers live.
Yeah.
Whether that is TikTok, that is Snapchat, that is Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Right? If you understand where they live, then you can really target on building out that network, because there's multiple ways of building out a network. There's in-person networking, there's by doing what you're doing with the podcast, and there's also building your network through those platforms that I mentioned.
100%. So now, Edgar, in about 60, okay, here we go. What would mastering the network 2.0 look like? What new directions are you personally heading?
So I'm going to say, and that's a great question. So master the network 2.0 is going to be, for me, I had to learn that the solopreneur, and we talked about this behind camera, Mike, the solopreneur was not my ideal client. I learned that I had to pivot to big companies that had business development specialists that didn't know how to talk about their company in the community. So I learned that it doesn't matter how much that company was worth. As soon as I identified that problem, that they were misrepresenting those companies in the community, and I worked with them one on one to work with however many specialists they had, their bottom line started to grow massively because of the way they were building relationships with the community.
David says intentional is good, but also is random connections. You never know what / who someone might know. And I'll tell you, I'm actually going to talk about a book I bought this weekend. I was at a bookstore, Stranded Books in New York City. I'm in the design section, and I'm there, and I see another woman there in the design section as well. So then I start asking, "Oh, are you a graphic designer?" Got that connection right away because you never know, right? I'm like, "Yeah, let's connect on LinkedIn." Would love to check out your work and stuff because people are always coming to me for things and I'm always outsourcing things. So you're absolutely right, David. But I think sometimes people are so like introverted that they're
Mhm.
scared to like make those random connections
Yeah. You can meet people anywhere.
anywhere.
One of my biggest centers of influence I met at an airport. Random, and it was by fate that we connected. And he lives in Florida,
Yeah.
but the key was following up, and by being intentional in the follow up, even though it was an unintentional connection. Now I know I can refer people out to Florida locally.
So Edgar, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna transition into book recommendations. I know you wrote your own book, so please make sure you drop that. But what other recommendation do you have for our viewers?
So one of the books that really helped me, and I've read this book, I'm gonna say 7 times now, is the book "Who Not How" by Dan Sullivan. Um, the highlight of this book is it's the book is so powerful that it teaches the importance of collaboration, delegation, and building a strong team to achieve your goals. Now, I'll break that up a little bit by saying who not how we spend a long time trying to figure out, because of our ego, how am I going to get this done? And we spend months and months trying to figure out how to accomplish a task rather than, again, mindset shift of who do I know within my network that can help me with this, that is an expert, and get it done so much faster. So it allows you to embrace delegation. It allows you to let go of control by trusting other people to get things done for you. And if you learn when you're networking how to surround yourself with who's, uh, it and leverage those skills, it positions you as subject matter expert. One thing I got a lot here in Vegas was like, man, Edgar seems to know a lot. What they didn't know is that I surrounded myself with experts that arm me to be dangerous, right? Just like in the military, we have a array of weapons that we can use. We just need to know a little bit about how to use that weapon, but there are other people who are specialists in that.
100%, man. And Dan Sullivan is a great entrepreneurial coach. Definitely check out that book. I've been implementing that myself. Who Not How. And if you look at a lot of his content from podcasting and things, he does these collaborations, right, to continue to expand his network. And so, me and my co-author, Alana Abernathy, for Black Veteran Entrepreneur, you think about the power of bringing two networks together instead of just one. So, definitely recommend that book. My book recommendation is a little bit different. I'm teaching myself how to design logos because I
Mm,
love building brands and I outsource a lot of the brand identity. I'm not a designer, but I'm like, man, I actually want to kind of practice myself, make my own little logos because I'm turning out so much stuff. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to teach myself. And so that's why I was at the bookstore looking at the design book. So I bought a bunch of logo books and everything. And it's also cool to nourish our creativity outside of business.
yep.
And the book rec I have is Drapeland Design Co. Pretty much everything by Aaron Drapeland. And it's funny, his company, Drapeland Design Co., is just him, right? So he was doing it to kind of be facetious, and you're seeing it within the space. But here's what I like about this book. Um, I feel like in this space of entrepreneurship, we're seeing the startups, raise $1 million and go yada yada yada. But one thing I like about designers and creatives, they're just trying to do what they love for a living.
Right.
It's very grounded. And then for me, that's like super kind of refreshing, but it's two different kind of approaches to entrepreneurship. One is all about the exit and scale and yada, yada, yada. Designers are about like doing great work,
Right.
having fun, and expressing themselves. And so that's where I'm at, with my agency. And that's why I love having a branding agency, because it lets me do that. It lets me do the work I love. And so I'm reading that book now, practicing my own craft. So check it out. Whether you're a designer, a freelancer, or you just need some inspiration, man, it's a really good book. And I'll encourage all you just kind of hear these different voices, because I do feel like we've over-indexed on the raise money, yada, yada, yada. And we're seeing people take L's in the media, right? That entrepreneur, $175 million scam, all this kind of stuff. So it's great. So as we wrap up here, Edgar, I'm going to leave you to give some closing remarks for our viewers as they continue on their entrepreneurial journey. And then I'm going to plug the transition.
Yeah. So, to close today out, I'm going to say, when you're building out your network, be very specific of who you're bringing in. The other thing I'm going to say is, and it's a very hard thing to do, track who's referring you, track who's not. And the hardest thing that I ever had to do, but I ripped the Band-Aid off, is I had to do a network audit, and I had to fire people from my network. Right. And once you do that, it'll unlock crazy doors, because then like, hey, who is my A, B, C, and D? You have to identify within your network who is championing for you, who still needs a little bit of more push, and then who's holding you back.
I would also like to add on, when you're trying to level up, you do need to look around and be like, man, I need to move circles. And I'm not even talking about from a financial perspective, just in the sense of like the craft that you're trying to learn. So I just talked about me working on logos and design. I'm going to a conference this summer with a bunch of designers out in Portland, Oregon. Why? Because I want to learn this craft. I want to kind of see how they think. So don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone and move into these other networks. So Edgar, man, I was great having you on. I'm going to get you on the Transition podcast to continue this conversation, because I think this can benefit a lot of early stage founders. For everyone else, make sure you check out the podcast. I did a solo episode last week talking about the difference between going to market for a tech-based startup versus a small business, and how you need to position your products and services in the minds of your customer, depending on which route you're going. Because, again, there's a lot of startup literature out there, but if you don't have a startup business model, you're not setting yourself up for success. So be sure to go ahead and check that out. Warwick wants to know, is everyone using a spreadsheet for a CRM? I'm not. I have two CRMs, actually. I do have a spreadsheet in Notion where I kind of put some contacts, but I actually use a platform called Pipedrive, right? Which allows me to, when I have business that's in play, I put it up on Pipedrive, and then I move it down the pipeline. And I can go over that on a solo office hours if it'd be helpful for people. Maybe I'll record a quick video for everyone. So a great question. And this is something I should actually probably talk about on the transition as well. So make sure y'all check out this platform. I want to acknowledge our sponsors for the Transition podcast, which is the MetLife Foundation. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. And also, I want y'all to check out our newsletter for the Transition podcast as well. So until next time, everyone, peace, love. Have a great rest of your week.